Hello Gameaholics, welcome to the channel. My name is Zach, also known as Hazard. Today we're going to be taking a look at Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Sekiro is a new breed of hardcore game developed by FromSoft, the developers most known for the Dark Souls series and Bloodborne. Sekiro might have very familiar mechanics as the previous FromSoft games, mechanics like pairing, sitting at the bonfire, and drinking good old-fashioned Sunny D. Oh, yes! Yes! Oh, please, for fuck's sake. Am I still doing? Oh, I'm hurt. Okay, cool. Oh, I am really hurt right now. Sekiro also has the staple FromSoft difficulty, so prepare to die. A lot. Oh, is that gonna kill me? Yeah, dude. I died from the fucking chicken? Sekiro is the main character, a warrior trained from a young age by the master shinobi Owl. I just like Sekiro as a main character. He's a rough-looking dude. Actually, in fact, I call him the homeless ninja because he has such tattered clothes and a worn-out look about him. He looks like he's seen some shit, you know what I mean? Fun fact about the FromSoft director, Hidetaka Miyazaki, he's a huge fan of the manga Berserk. He gets inspired by Berserk every time he works on a new game, and he always implements elements from the manga into his work. For example, the storyline of Sekiro, Dark Souls, and Bloodborne are all grounded in a specific time period. Dark Souls in medieval times, Bloodborne Victorian, and Sekiro in Sengoku. All the games at first glance are located in a familiar era in the past, but when you find out playing each game, there's always a twist involved. What's the best way to describe it? I guess interlocking planes of existence, sort of like in the manga Berserk. So Sekiro might seem like a regular time period in a specific location, but don't be so sure. I also have a hunch that Sekiro is actually a samurai version of the main character Guts from Berserk. He's got the white streaks in his hair. Both of them could be mistaken as antagonists. Both Guts and Sekiro are orphans raised by warriors and had to fight to survive. The cherry on top is both Guts and Sekiro got their left arm chopped off by the antagonist of the story, as well as the fact that they put a prosthetic there and use it as a secondary weapon in their battles. You're probably wondering what's my point for correlating these two characters. Well, just take this away. Sekiro is a motherfucking badass, and you should like him as a main character. But enough about that, let's go ahead and get to the storyline of the game. Genichiro Oshina has kidnapped the young Lord Kuro, and Sekiro has to save him whatever the cost. There's obviously quite a bit more to the story, but that's the gist of it. Saving the young Lord storyline is actually sandwiched between two other storylines, one having a mystical element going on in the background, and the other one being the storyline of Sekiro forgetting his past, and you trying to figure out what happened. Which is a cool storyline because it begs the question if Sekiro is actually a good guy or a bad guy, because the audience doesn't know, and even Sekiro himself doesn't know, making Sekiro's storyline about changing his presumed fate, just like the storyline in Berserk. I also have a good idea of the underlying lore in Sekiro. I'm not going to spoil anything, it's just not as good as Dark Souls when it comes to lore in my opinion. But a quick tip though, on the lore, talk to the sculptor that gives you your arm in the beginning of the game, listen to his dialogue, and then to get secret dialogue from him, give him sake. Make sure to read all the item descriptions of the game, which isn't too much of a pain in the ass because there's not too many items in the game to read. The graphics in Sekiro look polished and very immersive. The reflection effects from light off the wet mud and ground, from the sun or the moon, look really great. The hair and clothes move with the momentum of each character, very realistically. It gives movement and the feeling of realism that further immerses you into the game. The textures of the stone walls and the roads make you feel as though you could scrape your knee on it. My favorite graphic from FromSoft that they continue to implement is this hazy, misty effect the further you are away from a location, making the effect of being miles away. It gives you an immersive feeling of depth. I've noticed water graphics from FromSoft always look absolutely shitty. I don't know why. Maybe the engine can't handle it, but FromSoft has always had underwhelming water effects, which definitely sucks because this game's lore has a lot to do with the water. By far, my most favorite thing about FromSoft is their sound design. I don't know how FromSoft does it, but their voice actors are fucking fantastic. Especially.
その優しい顔の仏様はわしの彫ったもんじゃねえ。誠の仏師が彫られたものだ。人が己の内にあるものと向き合う。そういった時に助けとなるだろう。
And that's what you call being properly immersed. Sound is top-notch and epic. The sound effects of walking in mud or on wood or clanking on stone, the clashing of swords, the movement of armor. Most of the time it's so seamless you don't even notice it. You sort of just get absorbed into the world. But is there shortcuts and interlocking pathways? Yes, Sekiro has shortcuts, and they also have interlocking pathways, which is awesome. But level design when it comes to gameplay is always top-notch. FromSoft always has a way of making the players feel smart with item placement that leads players to secrets, or very purposeful enemy placement to get them to fight in a particular way. The landscape and level design in Sekiro is beautiful and varies up aesthetically, but you always seem to feel like you're in feudal Japan on the planet Earth, which isn't a bad thing. I just expected more of another worldly location and element to it. It's just that it could get boring for some players after playing 30 or 40 hours of gameplay, and especially like me that has ADHD, sometimes it does get kind of boring. When I said by no means this is a Dark Souls game, the main culprit for that is the poise meter. Think of the poise meter as a secondary, quickly regenerating health bar. Every enemy in this game has a poise meter, and 90% of all the enemies in Sekiro will block your attacks. So what the poise meter does is force the player to 1. Have autistic-like aggression, and number 2. Use the stealth system implemented into the game. The stealth system allows you to get an instant kill when behind an enemy, Metal Gear Solid style. You can damage the enemy's poise meter by perfectly parrying the enemy's attacks, as well as counterattacking the enemy as soon as you get an opening. In this dance of parrying and attacking, enemies will randomly throw out an unblockable attack. They give the player a second to react by revealing a red glowing emblem above the enemy's head, cueing the player to get out of the way. During the unblockable attack, you have to choose the correct dodge option, kind of like a back step, a forward step, or you can jump off the enemy's head like a Koopa from Mario, making you have to play a rock, paper, scissors reactive meta during battle. This is a great system for 1v1 combat. It inherently deters you from fighting multiple enemies though. In all FromSoft games, you want to avoid being surrounded by enemies. The reason is they don't take turns hitting you. Enemies usually barrage you with a flurry of attacks all at the same time. But particularly in Sekiro, it's 100 times more important. Most enemies block your attacks, and they do frequently, so a poking type strategy doesn't work in this game. In Sekiro, the way you kill enemies is to pressure one enemy to break their guard and get a kill shot. So what happens when you're fighting two enemies at the same time, you can't actually do enough poise damage to break a singular enemy's guard before being pelted by their ally. The enemy taking damage will get saved by their ally striking you, then back off for a brief moment and nearly recover all their poise, making the effort you just put in basically worthless. This can get insanely frustrating sometimes, especially when the developers implement Ornstein and Smough-like boss fights multiple times in the game.
Oh, fuck.
The poise system isn't built for fighting multiple enemies, making parts of the game extremely difficult and tedious. Traversing the environment in Sekiro is very fun. Jumping from a high location to catch the side of a cliff is awesome. Zipping around like Samurai Spider-Man, that's actually a pretty cool gamer tag, I'm going to keep that one. But zipping around to your destination actually keeps your morale up, especially when you've died 26 times and have been anally destroyed by the same boss over and over again. FromSoft always had a good grasp of verticality in their game, so adding a bungee jumping grappling hook just makes sense to me, and it's freaking awesome. One of the minor problems with the grappling hook is the fact that enemies can't actually catch you, or even reach you, because most of the enemies are melee based. If you're fighting a group of enemies and you start losing the fight, you can always run away or run past them, find the next bonfire. You can always just jump up in a tree, take a breather, heal up, buff your character, before jumping back down to fight. Another cheese tactic is just to pass a lot of the difficult enemies in the game by running or grappling away, and nope roping straight the fuck out of there. Which takes a lot of tension away from the battles in the game, because you always have this idea of just being able to completely just jump out of battle, which really sucks. The biggest problem for me in Sekiro is the fact that you only have one primary weapon in the game and no armor. Every other weapon you obtain in the game is a utility item for a very specific situation. For example, to use any weapon other than the sword takes spirit emblems. Spirit emblems are a currency spent when using utility weapons in this game. Take the Shinobi Axe for example. It takes spirit emblems to use it. The fact the axe animation is so slow and situational, the Shinobi Axe is a utility weapon, only useful when breaking a shield of a slow enemy, which really sucks. You also only have 4 skill trees in the game, which doesn't sound bad, but only 1 out of the 4 trees varies combat at all. The other 3 trees are for swordplay, sneaking, and prosthetic gadgets. So the trees don't really change the base combat, unlike past FromSoft games. Take for an example Dark Souls. You vary up your gameplay by using different weapons, or making a different character class. Being a mage in Dark Souls is completely different than being a knight or a tank, or an archer. Completely changes the base gameplay. Being able to vary up your gameplay with different weapons, armors, builds, brings longevity to the past games that really isn't here in Sekiro. There's a decent amount of variation of enemies in this game, but the mini-bosses are epic skill checks meant to test your skills before the main boss area. All the main bosses are epic and extremely difficult to defeat, because they vary up their attacks so often it's hard to predict when to block, when to attack, and when to move out of the way at the right moment. Sometimes main bosses want you to rip your own hair out, because what will happen is in the midst of battle they'll actually change up the way they fight, completely changing their strategy and the way you fight them, making them almost like 2 bosses in one a lot of the times. But the best thing though is when you're fighting a boss and you are on the brink of death, you're 1 hit away and you kill them. I mean, I gotta say, I get a little half chub when I do that.
Oh my!
But one of my criticisms of the bosses in Sekiro is the reuse of bosses. And I'm not just talking about mini-bosses, because those are just skill checks, that's fine. But the main bosses, they actually reuse the main bosses a couple of times, and it takes away some of the uniqueness from some of them, especially when you see them 2 or 3 times. There's a specific boss battle in Sekiro that I have a problem with. No spoilers, but there's a particular optional boss you can fight 5 times in different places in the game. You basically can't beat this boss without a certain item. You can't win the fight because you don't do enough damage without the item. I'm actually one of those people that will play a boss at a very low level and try not to make a single mistake to win, but with these enemies, even if you block, you take damage. So that requires the player to obtain these items to win the fight, which isn't usually a big deal with FromSoft games, because it's been done before. But in this game, the item is so rare that you only obtain about 2 chances to beat each boss, or you're shit out of luck and you can't beat all of them. Sekiro is a very immersive game with a large focus on skill-based combat. Personally, I love the combat, but a lot of players might think it is too challenging to be appreciated. But I can completely understand that sentiment. The previous games in the Soulsborne series were more inclusive. For an example, in Bloodborne, you could level your character up to a point where you're basically just overpowering bosses and enemies, and that's if you're lacking the mechanical talent. But Sekiro, it is 100% skill-based, so if you can't get good, you can't beat the game. You're just done. You're shit out of luck. So I personally think Sekiro is the hardest game in the Soulsborne series, and is only really meant for experienced gamers looking for a challenge. A big part of Sekiro is diving into the lore and trying to scavenge for bits and pieces of it, which makes getting the entire story of the game a hustle unless you're into that sort of thing. What I'm trying to get at and say is that you have to be a masochist to enjoy this game. Everything in this game, from storyline to combat, takes effort. Personally, I love putting time and energy into games like this, so I give this game an 8.5 out of 10. The game is amazing, but lacks longevity, which is important in every game. The score could have been higher if they added additional weapons and bosses in the game. It could have been a perfect 10. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like my video, you guys already know what to do. Comment below and let me know what game you'd like me to do next. Until next time, Gameaholics, see ya.